Welcome to F4 Talks. With me is Joseph Olmert. He is a long-time Fair Observer author. He's been a policy wonk in Israel. He's a professor as well. And he is an all-round jolly good chap.
Thank you.
All right, Joseph, we have a lot to cover today. Three things we'll cover. One is, of course, the war cabinet. The war cabinet has been dissolved. There are huge rifts now within the Israeli cabinet. Number two, Hezbollah chief warning war with no red lines. That's super important because now Israel has a very tense situation on its northern border. And number three, another bit of tension. Netanyahu, or Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also known as Bibi, accusing the US of not delivering weapons. And then, of course, the US denying that it canceled talks in Washington, D.C. over Netanyahu's complaint. So without further ado, let's get cracking with what's going on with the war cabinet.
What happened really was, in a way, technical, but not really, because the members from the non-Likud faction, I mean, the Gantz and Eisenkot, the two generals, they left the government, so they left the war cabinet.
Yes, we discussed that last time.
So that gave Netanyahu, the chance to dissolve the cabinet, but he did it for other reasons. He did it, first of all, because he knew that once these guys left, the two lunatics of the right wing, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, would demand to enter in their place, and he didn't want that to happen because it would look that he really totally depended on them, as many people claim that he is at any rate, but that would have created an unmistakable impression, But I think beyond that, what he really wanted to achieve is, and that is also coming back to the questions about, say, the dispute now with the US, which he initiated in a way. He wants to reassert his situation, his position as the leader, the number one man who calls all the shots, The
Supremo.
And that is a policy that he is enacting according, apparently, by his understanding of public opinion polls and expectations of his base from him, That could be the reason, but that's what he's doing. So because he's doing that, we can look for what could be the reasons. And the only thing that I can think of is to reassert his position, And that explains, as we should talk later about the dispute with the US, which again, he is not backing off, But I'll explain it. Look, what happens is that he takes a big risk here, because one thing is to blame others for what may be perceived as not enough success or failure or whatever. Another story is to be the only one in the center of everything, then, it all falls on you. So this is definitely a move that is having some risk from his perspective. But I need to tell you that at least last week, I haven't yet seen the polls of this week, it might have paid off to him in a way, because his base is starting slowly to come back to him. Likud now in the polls are already over 20 seats, And the way the polls are in Israel is that always Likud gets in polls a bit less than what they get in actual elections. So that is becoming maybe a trend, that he starts to pick up again votes that he lost to the right wing because he seemed to be weak. And now he is all of a sudden the old Bibi that is calling the shots, it's running the war, fighting with the US, and so on and so forth. So altogether, the question really is, and that's the question, how does it affect what is happening on the ground? The latest that I understand is happening in Gaza, and that's, I prepare myself to my talk with you, is that according to all accounts, the attack in Rafah is progressing. But I still don't see that it is changing in terms of the overall format of the situation. They take over territory, they try to clean it from terrorists and all this, from Hamas fighters, but it all takes time, And as it was the problem from the beginning of this war, time is not on the side of Israel, because the more the fighting is on, the more pressures are coming and the unexpected situations that can develop and so on and so forth.
No, so, if I can just interject, there's also a tiny little problem. You've been a soldier, I've been an officer. When you are engaging in guerrilla war, Hamas fighters are not wearing uniform. They can mixed with the
That's
civilians.
exactly the
And so,
criticism that also being leveled at Israel by American generals. If you read in pieces that written even by David Petraeus, who is very
yes, we've interviewed David
strongly, and General
in the
Brown, they
past.
are definitely pro-Israel. They are not against, on the contrary. But that's the problem from the beginning of all that, which will have to do also with what we talk about the North. The IDF in the years of Netanyahu, as of 2008, 9, 10, mostly after 2010, has been gradually reduced in order to lessen the overall expenditure on military and defense situations as opposed to the rest of the budget. And particularly after 2014 or so, under, by the way, the leadership of Eisenkot and Gantz as generals. But that will be used by Netanyahu in his campaign, And it was part of the overall sense that we are not going to have a big war in the Middle East that would require a big IDF. The IDF simply has become a more effective military machine, but much smaller. And they don't have enough manpower to don't just take over territories in Gaza, which they do very relatively easily militarily, but keep them under control at a time when they have to look to the north. It will be our next subject.
Yeah.
And that's the catch-22 of the entire Israeli strategy in Gaza, which will be a key element in the commission of inquiry that will be established after the war. And there will be a commission of inquiry. Netanyahu will say, look, it's not my fault. I mean, that's what the generals wanted. I accepted their opinion. And now see what happens. Generals, of course, will say whatever they will say, So that explains what is happening now in Gaza. And your question was absolutely in place. And the answer is that if the Israelis will stay in these territories without any move towards a political solution, so that there will be other units coming there to replace the IDF. Yes, there will be a guerrilla warfare, what they call in Israel Lebanonization of Gaza.
So speaking of Lebanon, Hezbollah is causing problems, as I just mentioned at the start of the interview. What's going on there?
What's going on there, again, is based on two elements. One always is the background. The doctrine of containment that existed in Gaza, Netanyahu applied also to the north. With the exception that I have to say, one exception, and this is that as of 2013, about 2 years after the beginning of the Syrian civil war and the involvement of Hezbollah in that war on the side, of course, of Bashar Assad, Iran, and all that, the Israeli Air Force started what they call the limited intensity warfare against the Iranian attempts to use Syria in order to smuggle arms to Hezbollah. But they never did anything in Lebanon itself, which proved to be a fatal and crucial mistake because that enabled Hezbollah to survive the Israeli aerial attacks, and to build a capacity of military capacity mainly based on the idea that we have enough rockets and missiles to do two things to Israel. A, to paralyze strategic Israeli systems, and B, to cause a lot of civilian casualties. And
they're doing both right now.
The effect of these two might undermine Israeli morale and be a deterrent to the Israelis to start a big war. And I need to tell you, sadly, they succeeded. Because until 2023, they were able, despite all that happened, to build their capacity. And let me tell you something about that. Here is a typical mistake of intelligence services, including not only in Israel, but also in the West, in the US and others. Israel was attacking Iranian Hezbollah targets in Syria consistently for 10 years and did it tactically successfully. Hezbollah lost many soldiers in the fighting in Syria. Hezbollah was involved in all the chaotic internal Lebanese situation, and yet Hezbollah maintained their readiness to go to war with Israel, which means that we don't pay enough attention in our estimates to ideology and ideological commitments. Hezbollah has wanted from its day one to be a tool of Iran in the overall jihad against Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And despite all their losses, all their problems, all their difficulties, which were objective, and I described them, they kept their preparations to what would be the confrontation with Israel, which means what? That so long as there is no problem along the border, obviously the intelligence community could say to the leadership, look, containment works. We have deterrence. But how do you explain the fact that on the 8th of October, they joined the war, which was not against Lebanon, which had nothing to do with Lebanon? They did it because of their ideological commitment and because they felt that they could do it. That's the main point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the strategic problem for Israel is now.
Mm-hmm. And just to interject, Hezbollah is Shia and Hamas is Sunni. And Hezbollah in Lebanon, and this is for our viewers and listeners, is involved in a semi-civil war, which is divided
all
along
this is true,
ethnic
and yet,
lines.
yes, and yet Hezbollah has always presented itself as the champion of the axis of resistance to Israel.
Mm.
Their founding document, the call for the oppressed people of the world and all that in 1985 was exactly about that. The Shia doctrine that Iran has developed is an attempt to give it an all-round Islamic, explanation that goes beyond the rivalries between Shias and Sunnis. Clearly, it didn't work to the point where, most of the Arab countries are not impressed with it. They're not supporting Iran. But Hezbollah is having one big advantage over everybody else. They are on the border with Israel. So they in a position where they can do it.
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to do. So
and Israel has had to evacuate so many citizens from the northern part of its territory, and it has had to keep some troops there just to keep an eye on Hezbollah.
But over 100,000 Israelis were forced out of their
homes.
Devastation in many Israeli settlements, which, by the way, the media in the world doesn't even pay attention to. They only talk about Gaza, but the most suffering there is on the Israeli side. And Hezbollah gradually, as you see, escalated the use of their weapons in this war, because each time they were careful enough to see what the Israeli reaction would be. Mm-hmm. They could contain it, they could swallow it, they could digest it, they moved on. And now,
they regret, Hassan Nasrallah regrets the last war with Israel. He thought in that was a strategic blunder.
That's the point. Mm-hmm. So, yes, he said it. And then he drew his strategic conclusions with the Iranians. And they developed abilities that definitely are a problem for Israel. And the Israeli army, as yet, hasn't found a solution to a particular type of drones used by Hezbollah. They're working like crazy now in Israel to develop the answer, and they will find it, a solution. Mm-hmm. But it might take time, weeks or months or whatever. It's not so simple. And Hezbollah basically is having, therefore, the overall strategic edge, because they are the ones who call the shot. The Israelis respond. So it led to a lot of discussion in Israel. Some say don't do anything, because with their missile, they could still cause so much damage and we can't take it now. Some say we can do it. And Netanyahu is under tremendous pressure here. Most of the communities in the north are Likud communities. The mayors are Likud members. They all criticize him. They attack him now for not doing anything or not enough, as they say. And the sense now is that Hezbollah can, understand all that to be a weakness and will escalate, so better preempt before something else will happen. And let me make another point here too.
So just when you say preempt, does that mean a two-front war for Israel?
That's why people say, finish it in Gaza already, move it quickly. Don't just talk all the time.
Yeah.
Look, the main criticism about Netanyahu, one of the main ones, is that on the ground, he basically does mostly what the Americans wanted him to do, at least in the last couple of 3 months. They talked about Rafah, waited about 2 months or so, and then they started doing something, in a way that is coordinated with the Americans.
Mhm.
But rhetorically, he makes up to not doing enough by verbally attacking the Americans so that he can pace back to his base.
I
But
see.
coming back to the North, that's more or less the same situation. In the last 3 months, if you look at the press, Israeli press, each time when the defense minister or any other senior general, IDF chief of staff or whoever, visited the North, they were a very strong threat to Hezbollah. We are about to do this and that, and nothing happened. Not true to say nothing. What they did was they tried to kill as many local commanders of Hezbollah, which they successfully did. Okay, so Hezbollah still fights. And then they started to go after particular targets also beyond the south of Lebanon, all the way to the Bekaa Valley and all that, but did it sparsely, not in a consistent way and all that, almost like the war of signals by Israel all the time, sending signals, we can do more. And Hezbollah is not deterred. That's the truth. They're not deterred. They're not deterred. And they got the green light from the Iranians to intensify their fighting in Israel against Israel. In the past, by the way, you mentioned 2006, the Iranians were unhappy with Nasrallah at that time because the war started without their planning. They kidnapped Israeli soldiers, the Israelis entered. They didn't expect it. And the Iranians basically said, and I can tell you that, it's a fact, they said to Hezbollah, what do you do? We are building you up to the big war with Israel to another time. Don't use it, don't waste it on what is not important. Now, apparently, they have the green light with the Iranians to escalate. And connect it, if you want to have a fullest picture, to Israeli statesmen like, say, Lieberman, who is somebody who knows what he speaks about. He says, in a matter of 2 years, and Gideon Sa'ar said it also, the Iranians are going to unleash the final big war against Israel. The last point here, just to give you the full picture, when the Americans are trying to mediate between us and Hezbollah, they basically say it's connected to Gaza. Which means what? Hezbollah is no more the defender of territorial integrity of Lebanon, as they claim to be. They are now becoming the power that basically will use against Israel whenever the Israelis will do something in Gaza or wherever else. And then the Americans say, we shall need much more time to mediate. Hezbollah are happy about it. In the meantime, they continue the war against Israel without suffering the final blow. So the overall situation, therefore, in the north is not in favor of Israel. To say it is not to be anti-Israel, God forbid, it's exactly the opposite. It's an Israeli perspective that I give you. The current situation in the north is not in favor of Israel.
All right, that's a very grim assessment from an Israeli point of view.
It's grim, it's realistic, with one exception. A lot that happened in Gaza, at least in the beginning, was unexpected. What happened on the 7th of October and then the extent of the Israeli reaction. So we always have the unknown. There might be the day in which the Israelis will say enough is enough in the north, and they have the ability, Israel has the ability to cause immeasurable damage that the Hezbollah either think that they know about or are afraid that they know about or they don't know about. But that remains to be seen. So it's a very brinkmanship type of situation, a very iffy situation. As of now, when we talk, Friday, the 21st of June, the strategic edge is on the favor of Hezbollah. Tomorrow it could be different. It's a very, very
you've mentioned
situation.
brinkmanship. Okay, you've mentioned brinkmanship, and it seems to be the case that Bibi is engaging in brinkmanship with the US. He's accusing the US of not giving enough weapons, and then of course the US is saying no, we did not cancel talks in Washington. This is not great for trust. This is not great
Very bad for trust.
the US-Israel strategic partnership. And I don't know if it is great for Bibi. It seems it is great for Bibi.
He might think it's good for him, but he might think many things that prove to be wrong. I mean, already proved to be wrong and maybe proved to be right in this case. So it remains to be seen. I mean, I connected to what I said to you before, his desire to reassert himself as the leader, as the most powerful person that calls all the shots, and
the Supremo.
It's very dangerous, of course, as we explained, and for obvious reasons. But look, connected also to his planned speech in Congress. It is a stupid idea.
Why?
I'll tell you why. Because in 2015, 2 months before he gave the speech, then I wrote an article against it and said, don't get biting gifts. The gift of the Republicans to speak will be very biting. And I proved right. I mean, the speech was okay. He gave a great speech in good English, so what?
Was it a great speech? I mean, it was all right.
Okay, so he talked. Schmooze talked. And the Democrats went crazy. Obama went crazy. The deal with Iran was signed. Speech failed. Just strengthened the image of Bibi as being pro-Republican instead of the traditional bipartisan support for Israel. And yes, it already started to get eroded at that time. So instead of accelerating the process, tried to delay it. He did the opposite. So the current exchange has also to do with the next speech.
I see.
And that's exactly what worries me and should worry any other one who really cares for Israel and is supportive of Israel, because what is the point of fighting with Biden 5 months before election that might lead him to another victory? Who can know what will happen? And why would you fight with him at any rate in Congress? Would you like Biden to come to the Israeli Knesset? And of course not. I mean, so look, if the Americans do not send some vital stuff to Israel, that is very bad. And that could have been handled in all kinds of other ways, by the way, by using the Israeli influence that still exists in Congress, with not just the Republicans. There are about 50, 60 Democrats who would still vote almost automatically with Israel. There are all kinds of ways to deal with it. But he did it deliberately in order to achieve 2 goals, to reassert himself, but also to prepare the environment for his talk in Congress.
So he's putting,
second point, by the way.
Just 1 second. He's putting his political interests above the interests of the country now.
Well, he would argue it's not. I mean, it's a question. They have the beholder to say it, and as you understand from my answer, But look, interestingly enough, I haven't seen yet, unless I missed something, and you are based in Washington, so you may know more. I haven't seen yet a Republican mobilization to support Bibi in a huge way about this arms business and all this, So I might be wrong about that. It might still come over the weekend in all the interview programs. Maybe some Republicans will start, talk about it more in a big way and all this, I don't know. That's what it is. Look, Bibi is fighting for his political survival. And he is not to be totally dismissed. I mean, he's not a spent force yet. He's definitely injured, but is it mortally injured? That remains to be seen. And he's doing what he thinks is good for him, that he believes is good for the state. At least that's the way it's being presented. I personally, because I already wrote about a speech like that 2 months ahead of time in 2015, it's not a new position here. There's nothing to do with the war now. It had then, in 2015. These type of speeches are damaging, are not helpful. And by the way, his rhetoric power is not what it used to be. A comparison to Churchillian speeches is an insult to Churchill, not to him. I wrote my PhD is about Churchill and de Gaulle in the Middle East in the Second World War. I know something about Churchill.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So the point then is, what are the implications of worsening US-Israel relations, and especially worsening Likud-Democrat relations?
Well, that's very bad. I mean, it has been bad already. But again, it's interesting to note, give a bigger picture, that the pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC, all their endorsed Democrats are defeating their rivals in primaries. And on the 25th of June, there will be a big test. Jamal Bauman from the squad is going to be defeated by a pro-Israel candidate and will lose his seat in New York, according to all polls and indications that I saw. So that's very interesting because question is what will be the implication of in the minds of those Democrats who say to Biden.
Maybe the Arabs are right. The Jews do run the world.
Well, no, maybe the Jews are right when they say the Arabs run Congress because of what Biden does in Michigan. You know, you can do it both ways. The fact of the matter is that AIPAC is a powerful group, and they support Democrats, not just in states like New York. They do it in all kinds of other states where there are hardly any Jews, you know, in all that. There is a quiet mobilization of public opinion that is pro-Israel, you know, and
the silent majority,
itself, as by the way, Jamal Bauman will become a big story. If he loses, that will be a message. New York will be Democratic in 2024. There's no question about that. But even in the state of New York, one can see less support for Biden now than what it was in 2020. And that could be related to a Jewish protest vote and all that. Also in California, by the way. So, look, it's a dangerous game. I put it this way. It's a dangerous game because there is a bottom line, and the bottom line will be on the 5th of November. So we'll see what happens, you know, and that's very dangerous. You can defeat Jamal Bauman, and yet Biden could defeat Trump, and, you know, so on and so forth. But it seems to me that the Democrats are in bad shape in these elections in the Senate. They're going to lose a seat in Montana, which might be a decisive seat. They're going to lose in Arizona, maybe. And the guy in West Virginia, Manchin, is retiring, and they might lose this one as well, you know. So, you know, if you're Bibi, coming back to Bibi, you may say, you know what, let's wait. I already waited so much time. Let's wait. And that's, by the way, a suspicion of many Israelis, that he's waiting to see something that somehow will happen that will change the situation. Look, politicians have their own ways of looking at situations. Are you aware of, by the way, of the Jamal Bauman situation in New York?
Yeah, I'm aware of it.
Oh, so you are, because you are so knowledgeable, but not everybody is. And it's very interesting what happens here, because the candidate is not against him is not Jewish. He defeated previously a Jewish candidate there. Now it is not a Jewish candidate, and, you know. So it may indicate that there is also a groundswell in the Democratic Party, which we are not so much aware of, that is not happy with Biden because they think he's not pro-Israel enough, as opposed to those who show that they don't like it when they think that he's too pro-Israel. So
well, it's complicated. The support has fractured. So there are Arab Americans who are not going to vote for the Democratic Party. And I know senior Democrats and junior Democrats who are worried about it. I also know that Muslim Americans, a number of them, some of whom I know myself, have decided not to vote for the Democratic Party. And of course, in swing states and swing seats, the Democrats are nervous about that too. For a long time, the Democrats got a majority of the Jewish vote, and of course, the vast majority of Muslim and Arab American vote. Now, in a very fraught time during war, you cannot run with the hares and hunt with the hounds. It's a more fractured world.
Yeah, but go to Georgia. Remember, Trump said, I need 11,000 whatever votes there. Imagine that 10,000 or 20 or 15,000 Jews in Georgia, in Atlanta, changed their vote.
Yeah. And do you think they will? Do you think they will?
Maybe. Who knows?
Who knows?
Maybe 10,000 people in Phoenix, which is a huge Jewish population. Over 100,000 Jews live in Phoenix. Maybe in Philadelphia. So it works both sides. Therefore, I call attention to those primaries on Tuesday, because it may show whether the theories, the expectations
And
are in
also, it is
reality.
not just about votes, because American elections are very expensive, and communities that are wealthier, such as the
Yeah,
Jewish
well,
community,
okay,
can
look,
influence elections
money is
more.
flowing. Look, money is flowing on both sides. And Soros and his people spent so much money on the protesting campuses. I mean, everybody knows it, I mean, it was proved also. And of course, Jews
So
and
George
others
Soros
spent
is a
money.
villain in your eyes.
Well, look, money was spent on this. Nothing was spontaneous. This all the same tents everywhere in America and all that. But look, and by the way, a lot of what's happening really, let's be honest about it, Atul. I mean, are you aware of the fact that the Commission of Inquiry of the UN to check starvation in Gaza found out there is no starvation? Totally baseless. Are you aware
That
of
I
that?
don't know. That I don't
All
know.
right. Go back to the UN and see. They suppressed the report. And why do I say to you? They also suppressed the media, a lot of the stuff that was already found out about who stands behind the protesting campuses. So all I'm trying to say, without getting into comparisons, who spends more in all this, it works both sides.
Understood.
And there is an
It's a game
interesting
everyone is
situation
playing.
developing. It could be surprising. All you need in Atlanta, look, over 120,000 Jews live in Atlanta. And it was almost a total vote for the Democrats all the time. 20% of them will change their vote.
So
Trump,
to recap, yes.
Trump wins in Georgia.
So to recap, what we've discussed today is that the war cabinet is gone, and Bibi is in a tense situation with his far-right candidates. And so he is ratcheting up the rhetoric with the US to win domestic support. And whilst that is going on, Hezbollah is basically increasing the pressure after green signal from Iran. And at the moment, the strategic situation is in Hezbollah's favor. Things are very fluid. Things are very divided. We have no idea what will happen. And people should fasten their seatbelts.
Yeah, but that means something else, that we should have enough material for another discussion soon.
Exactly. We'll have you back very soon.
To see how it all unfolds.
Yes.
And look, your summation is basically absolutely correct, because that's what we said here. Yeah. The situation is, the key word is fluid.
Yeah.
And we have always to say, as of now. As of now, we are losing in the north, I say it.
Yeah.
But as of now, Hezbollah feels that they win, which means what? That they will continue to escalate, that the Israelis will not do anything. Or so all this is very fluid, and also about the situation with the US, because the problems of Biden are beyond just the Israel-Palestinian situation, And he needs to maintain his total base in order to win these elections. And I don't know. Look, I'm based in South Carolina. South Carolina is Republican. Trump is going to win here by 56 to 58%. So he will win 55 only. Who cares? He's going to win it. And I can see, even in South Carolina, the beginnings of mobilization of the pro-Israel groups to come out more strongly now than before. Everybody knew that they're all pro-Israel, but now they're ready to come out, So I think that as we get closer to the elections, naturally people will be more willing to...
So you're predicting a Donald Trump victory, huh?
Well, I'm not telling you what I'm going to vote. And if I told you, you would have been surprised. So it's not about me.
AIPAC will
I'm not a member of AIPAC.
Win.
I'm not a member of AIPAC, never been a member of AIPAC, but I am following everything that happens. I'm bombarded with materials all over the place. And I see, and by the way, there is also another organization, Democratic Majority for Israel, which is a democratic organization that works for pro-Israel candidates. And they, by the way, they lost, for example, when they tried to put up somebody against Cory Bush in Missouri. They lost in St. Louis. So it's not just, but there is a war. Political war.
So interestingly, on a more serious note, the war in the Middle East has come home to the US in the sense that different ethnic groups and different religious groups are mobilizing resources and votes to win and push their
there's no question
respective
about
policy in Washington.
There is no question about that. And you pinpoint to a point which may become focal in American politics altogether, because it may also affect later on Asian Americans about US, China, and all that, and so on,
Yeah.
or Indian Americans, US, India.
Yeah.
And I'm an historian, so I checked about the Second World War. It's an interesting point.
By the way, you have to check out our World War II timeline. We are updating it. It's been a labor of love, and we'll send it to you for feedback as well.
Great, I will do that. But let me tell you that in the Second World War, it already was a point when Roosevelt, in this fourth electoral win, was under pressure to support Poland and the Polish rebellion and all that, much more than what he did. He refused. Yeah. And he was told already at that time, there are over 10 million Polish Americans. I didn't know that there are so many. I don't know if it's true or not, but there are millions of Polish Americans. They are Democrats, and you should do something. I said, no. So identity, ethnic politics, and the influence on American domestic scene have been an old story, but now we see it in such a big and almost like brutal way about the Middle East. And I agree with you completely. And that was basically what I tried to tell you before. Look, it's a political warrior.
Understood. Well, Joseph Olmert, thank you for your time. Always.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Atul. Take care. Have a great weekend and a peaceful one.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Peace.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.